in the Big Ten, we talk about hypotheticals in June. Some other conferences out there talk about it after 12 games have been played in the month of December. But I've got a handful of what ifs to consider for the Big Ten football season, and I'm feeling positive. I believe in 3 Big Ten teams out there that maybe some other people might not believe in the mainstream college football media. I'm here to break it all down on the latest edition of Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
2.5 months to go until this Big Ten college football season is slated to kick off at the end of August, but we don't wish away summer. Man, I could not be more excited to climb some mountains this summer. Although we're talking football every single week on this channel, on this podcast, on this show, always remember to get outside, enjoy some time at the lake. Always remember to get outside and certainly enjoy it because, hey, once we get to late August, once we get to September, you and I, we are dialed in to college football 24/7. I guess I'm pretty dialed into college football, certainly right here and right now. Please, reminder to subscribe and like here on the YouTube side. Also, on the podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify. Make sure you follow across all the platforms that this show can be consumed on. Now, it is the month of June. As I said, we've got 2.5 months to go until this season is kicking off, but I got some thoughts that are going through my mind. I've got some thoughts that are kind of dancing around. I've got some hypotheticals. I've got some what ifs to talk about. And I think which way these things go could really determine what the Big Ten looks like at the end of the season. How about we dive right into this first? What if Indiana is a better team? Emphasize team. We'll get to that in just a moment. What if they're a better football team in 2025 than they are in 2024? Now, just because that they are a better team doesn't mean that they're going to go to the college football playoff for the second consecutive year, although they certainly could. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go 11-1 for the second consecutive season. Like when I look at this Indiana team, everybody's writing them off. Everybody's saying, well, yeah, 11-1, that was cute. You beat a lot of teams that you were better than. Like Indiana was in a weird place last year. They boat raced a lot of teams that I think were maybe in the middle or towards the bottom of the Big Ten last season. And then, they didn't perform very well against Ohio State and Notre Dame, like those really high-level teams. I thought Indiana really probably fit in a lot more with maybe the Illinois of the world last year, where they were maybe below that, even though they got into the college football playoff, they were maybe below that top tier in the Big Ten. There was once you got past Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State last year, I think there was a pretty decent gap, but Indiana found a way to kind of fill that gap and get into the college football playoff last year. But I look at the roster for this IU team, and I'm like, this could be a better team. This could be a better football team. Let's start first with the quarterback position, why I kind of believe that this team could be better. Curtis Rourke was banged up at Ohio. He was banged up, that we learned last season. Fernando Mendoza, I think, could be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. If he is playing at that high of level, he gives, with this system, with Mike Shanahan, with Curt Cignetti, it gives Indiana a chance. We're saying what if? What if Indiana is a better team? What if Fernando Mendoza is playing at that level? It means Indiana is going to be able to play in every single game this season. It means that they are going to be in contention for the college football playoff. If this team is indeed playing at a higher level in 2025 than they did in 2024, I think that this team have a case to get into the college football playoff for the second consecutive year. The Indiana Hoosiers. Think about that. IU, if this team is playing at a higher level, if they are indeed better, even if they get to 9-3, and 9-3 is kind of where I'm settling in on this Indiana team, we're talking about 11-1 and 9-3 in back-to-back years. Let me do some quick math. 20-4 in the regular season over 2 years. Not in Ann Arbor, Michigan, not in East Lansing, Michigan, not in Los Angeles, California, not in Eugene, Oregon, not in any of these places. In maybe like one of the basketball capitals of college basketball. The football team is getting it done. If Indiana is a better team and if they kind of have a somewhat of a repeat performance, they're in maybe position to get to the playoff. This is an Indiana team that I think has some proof of concept. And if that is the case this season, Indiana, I think, is going to be able to build on that. They're going to be able to get a lot better in recruiting, and I think they're going to be able to sustain that because I think there's a lot of people, like I said at the beginning, that view Indiana as maybe a little bit of a one-hit wonder. If they are able to get it done and have even a really good season this season, they've proven something. They've proven that I think they are going to be here to stay. Now, I want to get to some single games, because these are very, very important. These are two that really stuck out to me. What if, and this gets the inner Wisconsin native blood in me maybe pumping a little bit. What if Wisconsin beats Michigan? All right, we got to kind of round this thing back. That is the first week of October. We got to talk about September 1st. Not September 1st, the date. September 1st, meaning the month, the entire month. Let's start first with the Wisconsin Badgers, Middle Tennessee, Miami, Ohio, Maryland. They're probably going to be favored in all three of those games. I don't think they're beating Alabama. I think Alabama has a tremendous wide receiver duo, one of the best in college football, of course, led by Ryan Williams. They got Ryan Grubb coming back with Kalen DeBoer as their offensive coordinator. That's going to be tough. That's just going to be a tough go, certainly. But if Wisconsin's sitting there at 3-1, I think they're feeling really good. If they can just keep their quarterback healthy, that might be a challenge in and of itself for the Badgers at that point of the season. But I think what's really interesting is Michigan. And I mentioned it last week, where they go on the road to Oklahoma, they go on the road to Nebraska. This could be a 2-2 football team at this point in time, where you've got a freshman quarterback kind of learning all about the world of college football at this point in time. Now, they could also be 3-1 at this point, but I think no matter what, this is still a very intriguing game to me. If Wisconsin is able to get the win, that is the statement victory in a just murder show of a schedule in year 3 for Luke Fickell. Like, they have not beaten good teams. The teams that they have beaten have not been very good. We have not seen a statement type of really good performance against a decent football team for Wisconsin in the Luke Fickell era. If they're able to beat Michigan, that I think gives that a stamp that says, all right, improvement, progress. Jeff Grimes is the OC. Things are working out. Things are going to that next level maybe for this Wisconsin team. The week after, they'd be 4-1. The week after that, they got Iowa at Camp Randall Stadium. Now, I think Iowa's a pretty good football team, but if they keep that confidence going, why can't Wisconsin be 5-1 through the first 6 games of the year? Now, I know they are certainly not going to be favored against the Michigan Wolverines on the road and probably Iowa at home, but if somehow, some way this thing can come together, and this running back duo, which I think is criminally underrated with Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree this year, and an experienced quarterback in Billy Edwards where maybe not as much pressure is on him, and the wide receivers are kind of coming into play. 3 returning offensive linemen are coming into play, and the defense is just, it's fine. It's serviceable. I think that gives Wisconsin and their future a little bit of a boost where there is certainly some doubt in Madison right now. Now, the back half of the schedule is difficult, certainly, for the Badgers, but even if they ended up 6-6 and they're able to beat a Michigan team that would probably likely have a better record than 6-6, that is progress. On the flip side, if Michigan loses, even if they're sitting there at 3-1, if Michigan loses to Wisconsin, I think there's going to be a serious microscope. Like, there is a world out there where they lose to Oklahoma. They're probably going to be an underdog in that game against Oklahoma, where they lose to Nebraska. And then if they lose to Wisconsin, all of a sudden you're sitting there at 2-3. Who knows what happens with this NCAA investigation? And then we know the 7-5 season last year. There's going to be a serious microscope being viewed by this Michigan administration upon Sharon Moore. And that's going to be a big tipping point, I think, during the season as well. So that's one game I think that really catches my eye. Another one, what if Penn State loses the whiteout to the Ducks, Oregon? Everything is on the table for Penn State, right? To win a big game. They've been complaining about playing noon games. They get a whiteout game, the first really big, significant whiteout since like 2018, 2019, and you get the Oregon Ducks coming into town. But man, if they can't get it done against an Oregon team that's young, that's inexperienced, although talented, if they can't get it done when they are the veteran team and they've got the best environment in all of college football, folks, let's start first with Penn State and what this means. Like, the voices around this program, the doubters around this program are going to be extremely loud. And now that Ohio State game on the road later in the season becomes huge. Now, this team could lose to Oregon. They could lose Ohio State, and they could have a typical Penn State season where they go 10-2, and they could get into the college football playoff at 10-2, much like Ohio State did last season, and they could make a run, and maybe they could win a national championship. But how were the voices surrounding Ohio State last year at the end of the regular season? I think if this is a team at 10-2, you're going to hear very similar voices, because I think Penn State is in a very similar position. I don't like to use the term natty or bust, but you're really close to that level like Ohio State was last year, with everybody running it back for the Nittany Lions, certainly this season. So if they can't win in that environment against an Oregon team that's going to really maybe be figuring some things out in the first half of the season, you're going to have some serious questions down the road and maybe some serious motivation the rest of the way for this team. Now, what about Oregon? What about Oregon? If Dan Lanning is able to go into Happy Valley, last year's win at Autzen, some say the biggest and the baddest environment in Autzen Stadium history. But if Oregon is able to go into Penn State and they are able to get that win over one of the best teams in college football, we're talking about the possibility of a back-to-back undefeated regular season run for the Oregon Ducks. And I think if they're able to go into that environment, I think it tells us a lot about where Dante Moore is as a quarterback. I think it tells us a lot about where the physicality, because Penn State is going to be a really physical team. I think it really will tell us a lot that Oregon is ready to meet the moment on the road. Will they be ready to meet the moment in the postseason? That has been a different story over the course, certainly, of their time. Let's move on. Let's talk about some quarterbacks. What if Nico Iamaleava and Mark Gronowski lift their offenses to new heights? Let's start first, because I think like both of these quarterbacks, if they're playing at really they're sailing at their highest level, I think these teams have different record expectations at that level. Let me try to explain this. Let's start first with Nico Iamaleava over there at UCLA. If Nico's going to have a lot of attention. It was very high profile, the way he left Tennessee and the way he landed at UCLA. There is going to be a lot of attention on him early on in the season, okay? If he is dealing at that high level, and I got confidence that I think that can happen. We know the tools that he has. We know when he's good, he's really good. You got an offensive coordinator there in Tino Sunseri that was maybe as big of a part as anybody, about the quarterback success at James Madison and over there at Indiana. So I think put them together, I think that could be a really good combination. But if Nico is playing at that level, I think UCLA is really garnering a lot of attention early, because you got Utah to kick off the season. UNLV, New Mexico, Northwestern. You could be very well sitting 4-0 with the Penn State Nittany Lions coming into the Rose Bowl. I think that'd be early October. Let's say you drop that game and you're sitting there at 4-1. Who are your next two games against? The Michigan State Spartans and the Maryland Terrapins. If Nico Iamaleava is having this UCLA offense playing at that high level, it would not surprise me to see UCLA be the surprise of the first half of the season and be sitting there at 6-1. Because if they're not, if Nico can't get it together in the passing game, they don't really have a significant threat. The passing offense, I think, is what is maybe going to make or break Bruin football. They lose some good players on defense, and a defense that was decent. That was decent last year, but it wasn't like outstanding. I know Carson Schlesinger was really good. I know they had some good players, but I think overall as a unit, maybe it wasn't as consistent as UCLA really wanted it to, and now they're trying to bring in a lot of transfers to kind of backfill some of those roles. So they need this passing offense to be able to operate on that type of level. So if Nico and this offense is running and gunning early in the season, they are going to be the talk of college football. There's going to be a lot more attention. I think that Penn State game is going to be pretty big. But here's the thing. The back half of the schedule is difficult. It's very difficult for UCLA. I view them, even if Nico is spinning it, I think they're like between a 6 to an 8 win team personally. I think I really like Deshaun Foster and what he's doing over there in Westwood, but I just don't think that this is as much of a complete team as a team that I'm about to talk about here in just a minute that can maybe make that run towards a college football playoff. Let's start with Mark Gronowski. If Mark Gronowski, the transfer from South Dakota State, he's going to be the new quarterback over there at Iowa. If he's playing at his top level, this is the most balanced Iowa offense since 2019 when Nate Stanley was the quarterback, and in their bowl game against USC, didn't they put up like 50 points? They put up half 100. It's hard to believe, even though Iowa put up some big numbers last season in a few games, but it's kind of hard to believe that Iowa had that type of offense within recent memory, before last season anyway, when they had those types of really good performances. But if Mark Gronowski at Iowa is playing at that type of level, it makes Iowa even more difficult to beat. Because right now, they're just a pain in the ass. They're a pain in the ass to play. Their defense, their special teams, and even last year and even like the year before, like the 16-13, 20-17 type of games, even teams that are really talented, they get sucked into these types of football games, and Kirk Ferentz just knows how to play field position. He knows how to play those games. If Mark Gronowski is playing at that type of high level, you can kick the Brian Ferentz era. Iowa is horrible on offense. You can kick that stigma goodbye. Because I think if that happens and we really see what Iowa can do when they have a competent quarterback, I think we need to start talking about Tim Lester being one of the best assistant coach coordinator hires in recent memory. I think last season, what he did producing a 1,500-yard rusher was, I think, a step in that right direction. But now if he gets the quarterback figured out, if he gets the passing game figured out, if Mark Gronowski can make Reese Vanderzee and Jacob Gill and Caden Weegan and Sam Phillips transferring, and if they can make that a respectable passing attack, this is an Iowa team that I think is outside dark horse type of college football playoff team. I truly believe that. Now, their schedule maybe isn't the easiest in the world. I think they've got a lot of games coming. They got a lot of teams coming into Kinnick. I think they got to go. They got to go to Iowa State. I think they got to go to Nebraska. I think those are at USC. I think are maybe some of their tougher road games this season. But what's crazy about last year with Iowa, despite Caleb Johnson running for 1,500 yards, you had Kamari Moulton and Jazz Patterson combined for nearly 800 yards. So you're going to have balance, and you return some really good players up front on the offensive line. I think I'm starting to gain a lot more optimism for Iowa. If Mark's playing at that level, man, I think Iowa can accomplish some great things next season. We know that defense. As long as Phil Parker's that coordinator, we know that defense is certainly going to be doing some good things in Iowa City, Iowa. Let's continue the trajectory of quarterbacks and maybe teams that can be outside contenders to be into the college football playoff. Boy, we cannot talk about a hypothetical what if Big Ten without talking about the USC Trojans and especially the Nebraska Cornhuskers. What if Big Red gets it together? Man, haven't we been hearing that for a long, long time here in Big Ten country, man. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. All right, let's start first because I think the quarterbacks carry a lot on their shoulders for the Cardinal and Gold and the Big Red this season. Let's start first with Jade Mayava. Now, I've made it clear that maybe I'm not like the biggest believer in Jaden. I saw last year, you saw some flashes, but you also saw some points where he got USC behind in that bowl game against Texas A&M, turning the football over. We saw what happened in the game against Notre Dame. But what if Jade Mayava's on the straight and narrow? What if he is making better decisions? What if he is a little bit smarter with the football and he's making those types of decisions and he's still showing the arm strength and the arm talent of kind of what we saw last year? If that's the case, if Lincoln Riley can really bring this thing together at the quarterback position, be that quarterback whisperer, and put Jaden into much better situations, he's got one of the best wide receiver tandems on the outside. Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, man. Like, those guys are going to make plays. If Jaden is playing at a level where Lincoln Riley feels confident in putting the ball in his hands and that he can go out there and carry them and make plays, USC's passing offense is going to be one of the best in college football. I think their defense is going to be better, specifically on the defensive line. I think USC is going to be better. Now, their schedule's a little bit interesting. They got to go to Notre Dame. They're going to be an extremely physical football team this season. They got to play Illinois on the schedule. They got to play Michigan on the schedule. They got to play Oregon towards the end of the year. Like, it's not the easiest schedule, but if this team is lighting up the scoreboard, who says that their offense can't carry them? Chip Patterson of CBS Sports think it can, that they can carry them to the college football playoff. I think if Jaden Mayava is a quarterback where you can put the ball in his hands and trust him to make plays down the field, this could be a dangerous USC team. I don't know if I'm quite ready to say playoff, because, man, there are a lot of teams, I think, if everything clicks, and I think USC is one of them, but I still get the heebie-jeebies with Lincoln Riley. But if everything clicks, that passing offense could be pretty lethal down there in Southern California. Let's talk about Dylan Raiola. I think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure for him and Dana Holgorsen to really mesh together, man. I think there really is, because they went out in the portal. They got some good weapons. Isaiah Hunter, younger weapon, but Dane Key, also at wide receiver, I think is another big weapon for them this season. Like, if Dylan Raiola, it really makes a big jump his sophomore season, I think that this is an offense that could be very, very exciting for Nebraska. I've mentioned before in this show about the schedule, and I think the schedule is favorable for Nebraska to really play well for them this season. If Dylan Raiola is a quarterback that you feel comfortable, that you can go out and make those types of plays, I think it gives Nebraska something that they haven't had in a very long time. They've had the Martinez, they've had Adrian, they've had Taylor that can make plays with their legs, but they just haven't really had a quarterback in a very long time that can make plays with his arms. And especially if Emmett Johnson provides some balance in the run game, I think that this is a Nebraska offense that Matt Rule and company has a lot more faith in. It seemed like last year that maybe I don't know. I don't want to say walking on eggshells is maybe the right word, because they did grow a lot more confident when they got to the end of the season and you had that Wisconsin type of performance. But I think at times it almost seemed a little bit tentative and a little bit unsure of what they really wanted to do. I think that this is a Nebraska offense that's going to open it up certainly a lot more. When you look to the defensive side of the ball for the Huskers, they're not as big, and I don't think they're going to be as good on the defensive line. They return a lot of guys in the back end over there at secondary. But if Dylan is playing at a level where Nebraska feels confident, where they can trust him and he can carry them, this is a team. Once again, we're talking about if everything clicks, they can maybe get to that 9-win level. They could get to that with that 10-win level, but we're talking about the Nebraska Cornhuskers here. It is certainly no certainty for them to be able to get to that point. Let's start with a team that's getting a lot of preseason hype. Rightfully so. I want to make sure that I say that. Let's talk about the Illinois Fighting Illini. What if there is a big drop-off at wide receiver post Pat Bryant? A lot of people are saying really good things about Luke Altmaier. And Luke Altmaier, I think, is a really good quarterback. Do I think Luke is like a great college quarterback right now? Do I think he's an elite college quarterback? I don't know if I would put him into that category. I think there's other guys at other schools in the Big Ten that that are unproven, that haven't really gone out there and proven it, that I think have better arm talent than Luke could have this year. And that's like being like a guy like a Julian Sayin at Ohio State. That's a guy like a Dante Moore over there at Oregon. I look at someone even like a Damon Williams that I think could maybe be that you combine with his running ability. And we know Luke certainly has legs where he can get out and he can certainly make some plays. But I think Pat Bryant helped Luke Altmaier out a lot last year. You combine with him with Zachary Franklin. And, Hank Beatty's expected to step up. Malik Elzy is expected to step up. You got Hudson Clement transferring. And, if all of these guys are just solid, if they're just good, and maybe they're having a little bit trouble getting open on a consistent basis, I think now that puts a lot more pressure on the run game. Caden Fagan's got to be healthy. We've seen flashes of him a couple of years ago at Minnesota. Had a really good game. We've seen what he can be, and I've said this over the last couple of years. I think if he's healthy, he can be a 1,000-yard back. They lost Josh McCray, their veteran running back in the portal. We'll see if Kaleo Valentine can take that next step forward, but now a lot more pressure, I think, goes on the run game to be able to create some balance and maybe to create better matchups for these wide receivers, where I think as of last year, I think you could just go, you could throw the ball. Because you knew Pat Bryant was going to get open. You knew Zachary Franklin was going to go out there and make plays. If you don't have playmakers, I think it changes the offense around a little bit. And I think it puts a little bit more pressure on different parts of the team. And if you don't have some of those playmakers on the outside that really step up, I think we're really going to see just how good how good of a quarterback Luke Altmaier truly is. Can he make everyone around him better? And then, what if the run game has a little bit of trouble, whether it's staying healthy or getting going? I think those are some questions. Those are some what ifs we really need to consider for Illinois. A lot of people are pegging them in that top 10, top 15 type of category. And they've got a really good team with a lot of returning production. How good is that returning production? When I look at Illinois, I think this could be a team that they can go 10-2. I don't think they can go higher than 10-2, but I think this is a team that can go 10-2. They can get to the college football playoff. I don't know if they can win a game in the college football playoff, because now, when you get to that level, your returning production, your roster, you need to have really good talent instead of returning talent. You know what I mean? That's something that I think a lot of people maybe get a little bit twisted. Hey, they got 90% of their players coming back. How good are those players? How good are those players compared to other top 10 teams? We might be able to find out. Here we are on this show talking about television. Once again, man, it must really be summer, but we talk about this specific aspect of television during the season as well. Here we are talking about Big Noon Kickoff and Big Noon Saturday, Fox's premier Big Ten college football product. At a recent press conference, Ohio State Athletic Director Ross Bjork talked about how he was really working to get more night games for Ohio State and how the Buckeyes were carrying the brand of Big Noon Saturday. I want to play this soundbite because it leads into maybe some of the points that I want to talk about here as this segment progresses.
Really started the conversation back in the fall, as we were forecasting out and knowing that we had a lot of noon games last year, just forecasting out, okay, we got Texas, big time game, who knows what would happen. We didn't know what postseason would look like back in November, right? So just mapping out, okay, that's going to be a big game. And look, I think our program, our fans deserve some marquee night games. So we started having that conversation. Texas in the contract, it goes both ways. They have the ability to approve or not if the game moves off of a Saturday. We asked them. I don't blame them. But those conversations started. We worked with Fox. They were understanding. But really, at the end of the day, there's no flexibility in the contracts. Fox bought the noon window. CBS bought the afternoon window. And NBC has the night window. And then the Big Ten Network and Peacock, layer into that. So what we need more flexibility. Can that happen anytime soon? I don't know. But I think every program should deserve the right to have way more flexibility. We have carried the day for Big Noon. There's no question about it. If you look at the viewership. So we understand why Fox went with Big Noon. We understand why we're picked all the time.
Whether you're a fan like you and me, whether you're an athletic director like Ross there, whether you're a head coach, whether you're a player, whether you're a school, whether you're administration, no matter what you are within this little bubble, if you're tired of Big Noon, if you're tired of your team playing 6, 7, 8, 9 games on Big Noon, too damn bad. That's the world that we've signed off on here in the Big Ten Conference. Fox pays the most money. They own a majority share of the Big Ten Network. Like, they are the premier television partner within the Big Ten Conference. I'm not going to lie, and this might seem a little harsh. It might seem a little blunt. It's really hard for me to feel sorry for Ohio State. It's really hard for me to feel sorry for Penn State. Even we didn't hear as much complaining against Michigan when they were really carrying the load during that 2022, during that 2023 time. But it's really hard for me to feel sorry for these schools and these teams when they're raking in tens of millions of dollars every single year. You are able to rake in that much money, to be able to build new facilities, to be able to continue to expand your athletic department, not just football, but your other sports in your athletic department. You are able to do that. A big part of that is due to Fox's investment into that noon window. Now, I'm not saying, hey, you're able to build a new volleyball facility because of Big Noon on Fox, but what I am saying is that they are putting a lot of money, they are putting a lot of investment into that product. When you saw the contract, you knew what you were getting yourself into. You knew what this exactly what was going to happen for the Big Ten Conference. So it should not be a surprise to anybody right now. Now, the big thing that Ross really talked about was flexibility in all of that. And that is one big thing that I certainly want to talk about, as maybe as it pertains to how this contract is going to look in 2030 and beyond. But I think when you're specifically looking at it from an Ohio State point of view, and really Penn State has been talked about, but really Ohio State, I think, is the main talking point that we got to be able to chat about. I think when it specifically comes to Big Noon, because of the conference's rule where West Coast teams cannot host 9 a.m. kickoff for these Fox Big Noon broadcasts, I think, like, as much as Ohio State doesn't want this, as much as their fans don't want Michigan to be good, Penn State maybe to be good, I think the best thing for all three of those teams, because let's call a spade, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, those are the banner carriers for the noon window. Those are the banner carriers for Big Noon Saturday and Big Noon Kickoff. Big Noon Saturday is going to be most successful when those three teams are most successful. If I'm the Ohio State Buckeyes, because that's really what we're focused in on here right now, if I'm them, I need Michigan to be a perennial 10-win team, right? I need Penn State to continue to keep on doing what they're doing. So maybe they can take some of the Big Noon games that maybe otherwise I would have been on last season. I think when you look towards last season, of course, Michigan being down didn't exactly help Ohio State to get maybe more of these games off of the Big Noon Saturday, certainly in the future. But as long as those checks clear, you got to do what the networks want to do, because that's what we've built for ourselves. You made your bed. Now you got to lay in it. You collect those checks every single month, every single year, and you've got all of this money flowing around, and it's important now more than it is ever with revenue sharing now. Okay, you collect all of these checks, you got to pay the price. If that's a sacrifice, you got to know what's coming in on the back end, and having a lot of your games at noon certainly is the result. Now, that's the reality of the situation. What would I like to see? Yes, I want to see a lot of diversity. I want to see different teams on Big Noon. I want to see different teams on CBS. We talked about how CBS maybe getting a little bit of the short end of the stick. I want to see bigger and badder games in the mid-afternoon. NBC got a really good game last year with Ohio State and Oregon. They get a really good game this year with Oregon and Penn State. That Penn State-Ohio State game, I think, is going to be very interesting because Ohio State and Texas is already going to be at noon on Fox. And if that game is in Columbus, Ohio State and Penn State this year, if that's on Fox again, this is going to get magnified. This is going to get magnified once again, and it's going to be an issue within the season in the month of November for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in 2030. That's when we're going to get a new television deal. Are the schools going to push back on this? Are they going to create some flexibility? Now, I'm about solutions. I don't think you're going to get into a situation where NBC and Fox are going to trade. It's like, well, now NBC, they've all kind of branded the big noon kickoff, Big Ten Saturday night. Like, they've done a great job, and I love the branding, and I love the way the schedule is set up. So you're not switching. You're not doing big noon kickoff on NBC one week, and you're not doing Big Ten Saturday night on Fox a certain week, although that would be interesting. It would be pretty interesting to be able to see that happen. But I think the time slots and the networks are certainly staying as is. I think one thing that if I'm some of the big carriers in the Big Ten, and that's Ohio State, that's Penn State, right? Those are some of the schools that are maybe going to be throwing their weight around in some of these conference negotiations. I would think of something in this next contract where maybe like you can play a maximum of like 4 games in a window, in a time slot on a big network every year. So, for example, if you're Ohio State in 2030 in this new contract, I don't think they're really going to be able to amend the contract as it currently sits. But if you're sitting there to renegotiate this thing in 2030, Ohio State, okay, they played their game against Michigan 3 other times. They could play on the Fox Big Noon window. That creates some more diversity where you got to move around some of these games. And I think it could create some certainly bigger games for CBS and some bigger games for NBC and get a lot more diversity. Now, you might think, well, Fox now doesn't have that number one pick, and Fox might kind of sit and say, well, we're still investing this large amount of money. Okay, shouldn't we be able to pick? And that's certainly something that they're going to have. I think what it comes down to is like if Fox, CBS, NBC were all paying the same amount of money, I think this would be a pretty even draft, and I don't think that this would be as much of an issue. But because Fox pays so much more in the Big Ten TV deal, it becomes a little bit more of an issue. But kind of getting back to my solution, where you could have a maximum of a team playing 4 times in a current window, I think it creates some diversity where maybe, hey, Fox might say, well, okay, we don't get so much top picks at the end. We might kind of decrease our value a little bit. Well, maybe some other networks might increase their value a little bit, knowing that they might get a little bit better games. So do I think that that's going to be something that's going to happen in the future? No, I do not think that's going to be something that's going to happen in the future. But there might be a point where, like, if Ohio State plays another 9 games or whatever on Big Noon, or 8 games or whatever it is, and Penn State, and you have all these games at noon, I think there might be a little bit of a movement within the conference to be like, hey, let's figure out some flexibility. I don't care what it's got to be. Let's just figure out some flexibility to maybe trade some things around so we can maybe get some night games. Like, I will say this in Ohio State's defense. I said at the beginning, hey, it's hard to feel sorry for you, but I will say this in their defense. They played 1 night game against Western Michigan. There should be a lot more diversity. Like, you should play noon games, you should play mid-afternoon games, and you should play night games. I think that was the really fun part about this Big Ten TV deal. Now you're stuck in one window. I think, and we know why fans don't like this, for an 11 a.m. kickoff. I mean, you're getting in there at 9 a.m., at 10 a.m., and you're not able to enjoy the whole day as a fan at the stadium. As a viewer here in the Central Time Zone, I like it. It really fits into my schedule certainly really well. So I'm a big fan of that and having the biggest game of the day on right away and not having to wait until primetime. But I think the big thing is diversity. I think the big thing is flexibility that I think the Big Ten needs to look for in the next TV deal. But as it stands right now, folks, you got what you got. You get what you get. Collect those checks. Smiles and nods, but maybe on the inside saying, hey, we'd like some change. We'll see if we get it when we get to the next Big Ten TV deal. It's June. The sun is shining. Everybody is optimistic. We've gotten through spring ball. Oh, man, that player's showing out. He's in the best shape of his career. Oh, this guy had a really big spring. Obviously, he's going to be an all-conference player next season. Now, I know some of the optimism that rings out there. And I'm going to be honest. I think this conference has a lot of really good football teams. And I think there's a lot of different scenarios that I think could take place in this conference this season. But I've got 3 teams that I really believe in. Now, just because I believe in them doesn't mean they're all winning 10 games. I think belief means different things for different fan bases and different football programs. So I want to make sure that I get that out of the way right away. But I think these 3 teams, I think I really believe. Now, some of these might go on with some of the trendy mainstream picks that are going on. But maybe others don't have as much trendiness and sexiness to them. All right, let's dive into it. And let's start first with the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. Yes, this Wisconsinite is maybe having a little bit, this native Wisconsinite, having a little bit of a tough time really admitting just how good I think Minnesota is going to be. And I made this public a little bit on the Twitter sphere here throughout this offseason as well. But man, Minnesota, they just have a proven offensive formula. And I think that they are going to lean into that offensive formula this season. Darius Taylor, he's one of the best backs in the Big Ten. We've been saying it for the last couple of years. And it's funny, he came just shy from a 1,000-yard season last year, but he's yet to get a 1,000-yard season. He's an extremely talented back. They brought in a transfer running back by the name of A.J. Turner from Marshall, 864 yards and 6 touchdowns. So there is depth at that position. P.J. Fleck likes to get physical. He likes to be able to run the football. Now, the offensive line is interesting because it's maybe not one of the better, in theory, what it looks like right now. Maybe one of the better offensive lines that they've had in recent memory. We'll see if it can certainly come into that. Now, they got Drake Lindsay. Now, when you're talking about belief, you're usually talking about things that are proven, things you can rely on. You not necessarily can rely on a redshirt freshman quarterback. Right now, even though there have been some good returns from some practices from Drake Lindsay. But when you look at the offense, they brought in Javon Tracy out of the transfer portal at wide receiver. They brought in Logan Loya, a good slot receiver from UCLA out of the transfer portal over there at wide receiver. You've got Christian Driver on this team. You've got Lemeki Brockington on this team. Like, there's a lot of weapons. But I think, like, Minnesota is just going to lean into, and I think they're going to be very good at what they do. And that's running the football and setting up favorable, efficient, high percentage passing plays down the field. Like, if this team had Max Brosmer coming back for another year, I would feel really confident that they can win 9 or 10 games with this schedule, where a lot of games that are 50-50 games, we'll say, are at Huntington Bank Stadium over there in Minneapolis as well. And then they have a familiar defense. Despite getting a new coordinator, you have a guy that's been around the building for a long time. Danny Collins goes from safeties coach to defensive coordinator. And I look at defense, man, it's familiar, and I think it's going to be pretty good. Now, I know they lose Cody Lindenberg, they lose Danny Strago, they lose Justin Wally. Like, they lose some pretty good players. I'm going to admit that. But, man, this defensive line, I think, it's going to be really good. It's going to be really, really good for Minnesota. Anthony Smith had 6 sacks last season. Jalen Logan Redding, 300-plus pound defensive tackle. Devin Eastern. Jackson Howard, I think this year coming off the edge, could really come into his own. A former LSU commit, and he was there for a year, and top 100, top 150 type of player. Like, this defensive line, when you compare this defensive line and how they can get after it with what they have in the secondary, with Coy Parrish, one of the best defensive backs in the entire country. Kerry Brown. Hey, Kerry Brown's a little bit underrated. You know, he kind of flies under the radar a little bit just because Coy Parrish is so highly thought of. But I just think, like, P.J. Fleck, since he's really gotten going at Minnesota, he hasn't really had a bad year. He makes bowl games. He wins bowl games. Last year, they were like this close, being like 8-4, maybe even 9-3. Look how they played against Penn State. I mean, look how they got screwed in that offside kick call against Michigan earlier on during the season. Like, this was a good team last year that played in, and they were in a lot of their football games a season ago. I think everything shapes up pretty favorable. If they can just get decent play out of their redshirt freshman quarterback, I think they've got a lot of pieces on this team. I certainly believe, count me in as a believer in this Minnesota football team. Let's go out to the West Coast now and talk about the Washington Huskies. Why do I believe in Washington? Because they've got one of the most electric players in college football at quarterback, man. Damon Williams, he's going to be fun to watch. You've got Josh Pate kind of ranking him in the top 5 of Big Ten quarterbacks. And, when it comes to his mobility and creating plays with his legs, plus what he can do with his arm, we got a glimpse of it, man, of what happened when Washington got behind in that Sun Bowl against Louisville. You saw Damon really will this Huskies teams back and give them a chance. And then you look at Jonah Coleman as a 1,000-yard back. You got Denzel Boston, Amari Evans transfers in from Penn State. Like, their skill positions, their starting skill positions are really good. The thing that I'm going to have my eye on is the depth. Okay, how is the depth going to be? If one of these guys go down, if a couple of these guys go down, are there going to be guys that are going to be able to step up in their places? Or if maybe they're double covering a wide receiver, or if this guy's not having a great day, where can they go from there? But I believe in Washington. It's the second year of Jedd Fisch. We saw Jedd Fisch at Arizona just take steps up the ladder. And I think Washington has enough talent around them this season, and they've got enough talented players on offense where I think that they can give pretty much every team on their schedule fits. Not saying that they'll be able to be in one position games every single week, but they're going to keep defensive coordinators up at night with the talent, with the big playability that they have on the offensive side. And the defense is interesting because it's Ryan Walters' first year. Do I believe in Ryan Walters? I don't know. Saw some good things at Illinois, saw some pretty bad things at Purdue. I think we're really going to find out exactly what kind of a coach Ryan is here in his first year as the defensive coordinator. But I think Washington is having an improved defense. Now, the defensive line, they got to replace everybody. But you look to linebacker, and I think in the middle of the defense, I think they've got some decent players. Tariq Al-Aquad, I hope I'm saying that right, 57 tackles, 3 interceptions at Washington State last year. He transfers over. A healthy Zach Durfee could make a big difference coming off the edge for the Huskies. Isaiah Ward, Russell Davis, a couple of former Arizona players that I think Washington is expecting to play a bigger role. And then Ephesians Prysock and Takario Davis, 2 also former Arizona Wildcats, kind of coming in, and I think that they've got those corner spots locked down, and I think they're going to be pretty good over there as well. This Washington defense just needs to be average. If that offense is performing at the level that we think, that we believe that it can perform, just give me an average defense, Ryan Walters, and I think you're going to be in a lot of games. Let the offense cook. I believe in this Washington team to really make a decent second-year jump by maybe a couple of games from where they were last season at 6-6 in the regular season. Last team that I'm going to talk about that I believe in is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. I mean, these last couple of years, back-to-back bowl appearances for Greg Schiano. And it's just, it's death taxes. Greg Schiano puts out good football teams, disciplined football teams, teams that are hard-nosed. They bring their lunch pail to work. They play very good on special teams as well. That's the kind of team that you get out of Rutgers. When I look at the Scarlet Knights, you look at a returning and experienced quarterback and an offensive line. Now, I'm not crazy about Ethan Kaliakmanis. I don't think he's an extremely good quarterback and player, but there's something to be said about having played as long as he had in the Big Ten Conference. Last season, what is 2,600 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks? That's decent. If he can get somewhere, around 2,800 yards and 20 touchdowns, they could be doing something. So we'll see if that indeed can happen with Ethan. I think Ethan's best friend is going to be an experienced offensive line. All 5 of these guys, projected starters, are slated to be seniors. They played a lot of football. And now maybe not every one of them has started a bunch of games. Gus Zelenkas is going to anchor this thing, 3rd year starting for Rutgers. It's great to have that type of Scarlet Knights experience in the middle of the O-line, but you compare, you look at those 2 positions as having experience. I think that's going to help your offense in a lot of big ways, certainly. And this team, Rutgers did a great job in the transfer portal. They must have had a good amount of money laying around to be hey, we got to go out and get some guys in the portal. They had the 9th-ranked transfer portal class in the country, the 2nd-ranked transfer portal class in the Big Ten. They didn't bring in 25 or 30 guys. They brought in 16 players. C.J. Campbell, the running back from Florida Atlantic, 840 yards and 11 scores last season. Like, I think there's going to be more depth. Kyle Monangai, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. There's going to have to be more depth in the running back room as well. Antoine Raymond, Samuel Brown. I think you're going to have a 2 to 3-headed monster to be able to kind of replicate that type of production that we saw from Monangai. And I think they've got decent receivers as well. Like, in the past few years, this might be as good as I've felt about Scarlet Knights' weapons on the perimeter. DT Sheffield is a transfer that comes in from North Texas, 816 yards and 11 scores last season. They need, like Rutgers for years has needed explosiveness and speed and skill and playmaking ability on the perimeter. They're hoping that they can get that certainly as well. But they went out, they got good players in the transfer portal. And I just believe in this team. They got a tough schedule, but if they can sweep their non-conference, I think they got Purdue and Maryland on the schedule. Find a way to pull one upset, and you're right there at 6-6, and you'd be looking at your third consecutive bowl season in a row. I believe that Greg Schiano can pull that off for the Scarlet Knights this season. I believe that the Big Ten is going to be full of some great football this upcoming season. Another edition of Big Nation in the books. Make sure you subscribe and like here on the YouTube platform, as well as follow, rate, and review on the audio podcast platforms as well. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next edition of Big Nation.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms.